Millionaire husband takes his mistress to dinner, unaware his pregnant wife is watching from afar. They say the greatest betrayal often comes cloaked in silk and diamonds, and on this fog-laced evening in New York City, that cruel adage is about to unveil itself in the most unexpected place, an upscale Italian restaurant on Fifth Avenue. Leah Hamilton, newly pregnant and brimming with tenderness for the life growing within her, slips into a corner booth unseen. A few tables away, her billionaire husband, Daniel Hamilton, strides in with the radiant woman everyone believes is merely his assistant. In the city that never sleeps, a clandestine affair now bursts into the open, yet Daniel remains blissfully unaware he's being watched by the very woman he once vowed to protect. Leah Hamilton had always believed in fairy tales, not in the naive sense of a wide-eyed child, but in that soft, unwavering faith that goodness and love will eventually triumph, no matter how dire the circumstances. Raised in a humble suburban home in Massachusetts, she dreamed of a life where warmth, trust, and kindness were virtues as ubiquitous as the sunsets that she and her mother, Teresa Clark, used to watch from their quaint backyard swing. On a brisk autumn evening at a charity function 3 years ago, Leah's life underwent a whirlwind transformation when she first encountered Daniel Hamilton. He was introduced to her by a mutual acquaintance, Dr. Kimberly Baxter, a respected psychologist from Glendale who worked as a consultant on philanthropic projects. Daniel, a then rising business magnate, towered over the rest of the crowd with an air of quiet confidence. He stood by the golden-framed portrait of some long-deceased patron, fielding questions about his newly established Hamilton Innovations Group. Leah, attending the event as a volunteer, served drinks and smiled politely at guests. When she approached Daniel with a glass of sparkling water, their eyes locked. A conversation that started with shy pleasantries quickly turned into an unshakable bond. Within months, Daniel dazzled Leah with expensive gifts, weekend trips to Monte Carlo, and spontaneous helicopter rides to watch the city's skyline at sunset. Yet behind all these grand gestures was a genuine kindness that made Leah's heart flutter. He would listen to her childhood stories, help her mother financially without a second thought, and speak passionately about charitable endeavors that resonated with Leah's philanthropic leanings. It was as though she had stumbled into a dream of love and luxury, and she felt safe in Daniel's presence. Not once in those early days did she suspect that their love story would warp into something twisted and searing. They married in a private ceremony on the shores of Lake Como, an idyllic setting that mirrored Leah's bursting joy. The wedding was small, intimate, attended by immediate family, close friends, and a few business associates. During the vows, Daniel had held Leah's gaze and promised her unwavering loyalty. His hand on her cheek felt like a brand of reassurance, a silent vow that he could and would protect her from all the world's storms. Leah remembered that promise vividly because, in the beginning, Daniel kept it. In her eyes, his loyalty was unwavering. The first year of their marriage was a golden tapestry of laughter, travel, and building a future. When Leah discovered she was pregnant, she felt a wave of euphoria. The small life growing inside her was like a silent affirmation that everything in their lives was aligning in perfect harmony. But within that year, Daniel's empire expanded beyond measure. Hamilton Innovations Group secured massive international contracts, soared on the stock market, and turned Daniel into a public figure revered by many. The media hailed him as a visionary, a genius even. As money and power flooded in, a new version of Daniel began to surface, someone capable of unspoken secrets and sudden mood changes. And so, the first threads of suspicion crept into Leah's mind when he started returning home at odd hours, claiming the demands of success were too intense to allow for a normal schedule. Of course, Leah wanted to believe him. She had grown up hearing her own father say similar words to her mother when he was working overtime at the factory, so the pattern didn't immediately raise alarm bells. But something felt off. Something in Daniel's eyes would shift whenever she pressed him about his day. Instead of meeting her gaze, he would glance away, almost as if his mind were somewhere else entirely. It started with small rumors, harmless gossip, swirling through the halls of Hamilton Innovations. An offhand remark from a newly hired executive assistant, an overheard snippet in the break room about the boss and someone special. Leah, who volunteered at Daniel's company events, heard these comments in passing but dismissed them. She considered them typical rumors that breed wherever wealth and power reside. Then, one day, she attended a Hamilton Innovations luncheon and noticed a young woman in a sleek black dress clinging to Daniel's side a little too closely. He introduced her as Stephanie Brooks, his new chief communications officer. She was polished, poised, and exuded an almost magnetic confidence that overshadowed even the professional aura around her. Stephanie smiled the way women do when they're intimately aware of a man's desires. Yet, Leah still tried to silence her insecurities. She reminded herself she was pregnant and that her hormones might be casting dark shadows where none existed. But the seeds of suspicion refused to wither away. Over the next few weeks, Leah observed how Daniel's phone calls would abruptly end whenever she entered the room, or how text messages illuminated his phone at odd hours, messages he never shared. He would mention business dinners with vague contacts, but never name them. When pressed, he'd respond with a gentle smile and say, "These deals are complicated, sweetheart. I don't want to bore you with the details." It was Leah's mother, Teresa, who first vocalized Leah's fears. Over tea one evening, Teresa eyed her daughter's trembling hands and softly suggested, "Have you asked Daniel directly about these dinners?" Leah shook her head. She was terrified of what the answer might be. "He's done so much for me, Mom. He's busy. I don't want to pry." Teresa patted Leah's hand. "There's a difference between prying and understanding what's going on in your own marriage. You have every right to know, Leah." Leah appreciated her mother's concern, but she also felt a wave of guilt. She was carrying Daniel's child, and he had never given her a concrete reason not to trust him. Plagued by indecision, she decided to gather more information before confronting him. The tension inside her chest felt like a coiled snake waiting to strike, but she needed certainty. In the second trimester of her pregnancy, Leah found her world shifting around the life growing inside her. Moods soared and crashed, tears came unexpectedly. And every time Daniel returned home later than promised, 1,000 questions gnawed at her. The final straw came one afternoon when she visited Daniel's office unannounced to discuss an upcoming charity gala. At the receptionist's desk, she asked to see her husband. The receptionist, startled, stuttered that Mr. Hamilton was out with Miss Brooks and wouldn't be back until after dinner. Leah felt her heart drop. She flashed a polite smile, claiming that she'd forgotten about the scheduled meeting. With that, she turned on her heel and left, ignoring the worried glances of the staff who recognized her as the boss's wife. In the elevator, Leah's stomach churned not just from her pregnancy, but from the realization that Daniel was alone with Stephanie. She tried to rationalize it. He's with his chief communications officer. Maybe they're discussing marketing strategies. She repeated these justifications in a chant-like manner, willing her mind to calm, but a flicker of dread settled into her bones. Before stepping into her car, Leah made a choice that would change everything. She called an old friend, Sarah Patterson, who ran a discreet investigative service in New York. They had met long ago when Sarah used to handle background checks for philanthropic organizations. Though it pained her to do this, Leah asked Sarah to discreetly look into Daniel's whereabouts that night. Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to betray Leah's trust or Daniel's privacy. But Leah sounded desperate, her voice heavy with tears. Reluctantly, Sarah agreed. That evening, Leah sat by her bedroom window, phone in hand, waiting for news. She stared down at the city lights and recalled the early days of her marriage, how Daniel used to wrap his arms around her waist, whispering he'd never let her go. With a sigh, she pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the gentle flutters of her baby. That movement felt both comforting and heartbreaking. An hour later, her phone vibrated. Sarah sent a text. Sarah text, Leah, I have news. Daniel is at Il Ristorante d'Oro on 5th Avenue. He's not with any corporate team. He's at a private table with Miss Brooks. The staff there say they look more than professional acquaintances. I'm sorry. Leah's breath caught. She typed to reply, Leah text. Thank you, Sarah. I just needed to know. Leah spent a sleepless night tossing and turning, haunted by images of Daniel leaning across a candlelit table, murmuring sweet nothings to a woman who wasn't her. She tried to visualize his face, the face she had trusted with her heart, but each time she saw his warm brown eyes, they morphed into something cold, distant, and filled with betrayal. Over the next few days, Leah wrestled with how to confront Daniel. She knew that if she outright accused him, he might deny everything, or worse, gaslight her into doubting her own sanity. Yet she needed to confirm her suspicions, once and for all. Armed with the knowledge Sarah provided, Leah hatched a plan that both terrified and emboldened her. She would follow Daniel to one of these dinners. If she truly wanted the truth, she had to see it with her own eyes. To camouflage her presence, she enlisted the help of a friendly acquaintance, Carmen Reyes, an actress who owed Leah a favor after a charity project. Carmen provided Leah with a discreet wig, tinted contacts, and a professional makeup artist who could alter Leah's appearance just enough to pass unrecognized in dim lighting. While Leah loathed the idea of spying, the alternative, living in denial, was far more unbearable. The following Friday evening, after Daniel left the penthouse in a hurry, claiming he had a business engagement, Leah swiftly changed into a dark dress, donned her disguise, and slipped into a taxi. She instructed the driver to head for the upscale district of 5th Avenue, keeping a watchful eye on her phone. Sarah had texted Leah earlier, noting that Daniel made a reservation for 2 at La Sorella, one of the city's most exclusive Italian restaurants. Leah arrived before Daniel and hid herself in a corner booth with a wide-brimmed hat shielding most of her face. Sure enough, 30 minutes later, Daniel walked in, wearing a crisp, tailored suit, exuding the magnetism of a man who believed he ruled the world. His hand guided Stephanie Brooks, clad in a figure-hugging red dress, toward a private table near the window overlooking the city's sparkling lights. Leah could hardly breathe. She hovered behind a high-backed booth, her heart hammering in her chest as she watched Daniel pull out Stephanie's chair. The two laughed over something, and Daniel brushed his hand lightly across Stephanie's shoulder. His expression radiated the same warmth Leah thought was reserved for her. She felt tears burn at the corners of her eyes. Her pregnancy hormones roared, telling her to storm over and slap him across the face. But she managed to maintain her composure, reminding herself why she was here. She needed the truth, unfiltered, undeniable. For over an hour, Leah bore witness to a gruesome dance of betrayal. Daniel leaned in close to Stephanie, whispering in her ear, causing the younger woman to giggle flirtatiously. Occasionally, Stephanie rested her hand on his, her painted nails lightly drumming on his wedding ring as though it were a nuisance. The waiters, clearly discreet, floated by, refilling their wine glasses, attempting not to stare too openly. Leah forced herself to remain. She took furtive pictures with her phone to document the meeting, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. A part of her hoped Daniel might glance around and see her, that he'd realize the magnitude of what he was doing. But not once did his gaze roam to the shadows where his pregnant wife watched him commit the ultimate betrayal. When the meal ended, Daniel signaled for the check. Stephanie leaned in again, and he placed a tender kiss on her cheek, an intimacy that stabbed Leah like a knife. Her resolve nearly broke. She wanted to scream, to confront him right there in that golden-lit restaurant, but the voice of reason and the memory of her unborn child anchored her. Heart pounding, she rose from her hiding place and slipped out the side exit, a swirl of conflicting emotions trailing behind her. She had seen more than enough. That night, Leah locked herself in the guest bedroom of their lavish penthouse, ignoring Daniel's concern knocking when he finally returned. She pretended to be asleep, ignoring the gentle rattles of the door handle. She needed time to process the heartbreak and think about her next steps. In the morning, she confronted him quietly. She opted for a strategic approach. She said nothing about witnessing the dinner herself. Instead, she inquired about his business meeting and asked leading questions. Daniel lied flawlessly, weaving a tale about long negotiations over a potential European expansion deal. Leah felt a cold numbness settle in. It was one thing to suspect your husband's unfaithfulness. It was another to have him look into your eyes and lie without hesitation. Still, she kept her emotions carefully subdued, as if tucking them under lock and key. She worried about the baby. Stress levels were known to affect pregnancies. She had to take care of her health, even if her heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. That afternoon, she called Sarah once more, thanking her for the assistance and confessing that her worst fears had been confirmed. Sarah was sympathetic, even outraged on her behalf. But Leah was unsure of what to do. Confrontation seemed inevitable, but the timing and the potential consequences weighed heavily on her mind. She recalled Dr. Kimberly Baxter, who had introduced her to Daniel. Kimberly had become somewhat of a confidant. Perhaps she could offer professional advice. Setting aside her pride, Leah reached out and asked for an appointment under the guise of wanting marital counseling. Kimberly agreed without hesitation, sensing the urgency in Leah's voice. Leah met Kimberly in her private office, which was tastefully decorated with soft blues and artwork depicting seascapes. The therapist offered Leah tea, and Leah gratefully accepted, aware her trembling hands might spill any beverage stronger than water. Through tears, Leah recounted the entire ordeal, her suspicions, the evidence, the clandestine dinner. Kimberly listened intently, occasionally nodding in acknowledgement. When Leah finished, Kimberly sighed, sadness etched in her eyes. "Leah, I've known Daniel for quite a while. This behavior is unlike the man I introduced you to, but people do change under the weight of success. The question is, what do you want to do moving forward?" Leah rubbed her temples. "Part of me wants to leave him. Another part of me is terrified of losing the life we've built. And what about the baby? Growing up, my father left us when I was 6. I'd hate for my child to have a broken family." Kimberly's gaze softened. "No decision has to be made today. But I strongly advise that you confront him calmly with your evidence. Let him know you won't tolerate lies. If he's willing to work on this, you can consider couples therapy. If he isn't, then you have to think about what's best for you and the baby." Leah left Kimberly's office, feeling marginally lighter, but still burdened by the monumental choice ahead. That evening, she texted Daniel, requesting that he come straight home after work. Daniel agreed, sounding puzzled but not alarmed. Leah spent the rest of the afternoon rehearsing what she would say, determined not to let her emotions derail her. When Daniel arrived, he found Leah sitting quietly in the living room, the city lights twinkling beyond the penthouse windows. She gestured for him to sit beside her. He tried to kiss her hello, but she turned away, causing a flicker of concern to cross his face. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice tinged with genuine worry. Leah took a deep breath, bracing herself. "We need to talk about Stephanie Brooks." Instantly, Daniel's expression tightened, his eyes darting to the floor. I told you, Leah. She's my chief communications officer. We've had a lot of work lately. She's not just your communications officer, Leah said, her tone steeled by heartbreak. I followed you to La Sorella last Friday. I saw you kissing her cheek, holding her hand, laughing intimately. You even lied about it the next morning. A beat of silence. Daniel's face paled, and for an instant, Leah thought she saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. But then his mouth twisted into something defensive. You followed me, he said, incredulous. You spied on me? Leah's hand clenched around the phone in her lap. I'm pregnant, Daniel, and I had no choice. You've been lying to me, sneaking around with Stephanie. I saw it with my own eyes. Don't try to deny it now. Daniel took a sharp breath, rubbing his temples as if weighed down by the situation. Finally, he said, Leah, I never meant for you to find out like this. His words were a dagger. But you did it, she said quietly. Tears blurred her vision. How long has this been going on? 6 months, Daniel admitted, staring at the wall. It started out as flirting, and I was stressed, overwhelmed with the company's growth. She was just. There, Leah's tears fell freely now. How could you do this? We have a baby on the way. Daniel swallowed. I don't know, Leah. I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. Leah scoffed. It didn't just happen. You allowed it to happen. A silence fell between them, thick with the ghosts of what they once were and the bitter reality of what they'd become. Leah, exhausted, pressed a hand to her belly. She could feel the baby's soft movements, a reminder of the life she was fighting to protect. Daniel, she managed, her voice trembling, I saw you betray me with my own eyes. I need you to leave this penthouse for now. He started to protest, tears shining in his own eyes. But Leah, this is our home. What about you, our baby? You should have thought about that before you chose to cheat, she spat, a rare flash of anger in her voice. I need time to think, to decide what's best for me and for our child. He seemed to deflate. Hanging his head, he slowly rose from the couch, walking toward the bedroom to pack a small bag. As he left, Leah stayed rooted to the spot, her heart pounding. She wanted to collapse into sobs, but part of her was fueled by a fierce maternal instinct, a determination to protect her child from the consequences of Daniel's betrayal. For the next few weeks, Daniel stayed at one of his corporate suites in Midtown. The media barely sniffed a whiff of the scandal, thanks to his PR team likely orchestrated by none other than Stephanie Brooks. Leah avoided reading tabloids or corporate gossip blogs, not wanting to feed the heartbreak. She busied herself with preparing a nursery, leaning on her mother and a few close friends for support. Daniel, meanwhile, bombarded her with messages. He apologized profusely, claimed the affair was over, and begged for her forgiveness. But trust was a fragile thing, and once broken, it was not so easily mended. During a follow-up session with Dr. Kimberly Baxter, Leah confessed her conflicted emotions. I hate him for what he's done, but I also miss him, and I'm scared of being a single mother. Kimberly nodded empathetically. Your feelings are completely valid. The question is, do you believe Daniel can truly change? And if he can, are you willing to risk trusting him again? Leah struggled to answer. The man she fell in love with was kind and compassionate, but the man who cheated was callous and self-serving. Which version of Daniel was real, or were both sides equally him? Unbeknownst to Leah, a storm was brewing outside the safe walls she'd tried to construct. Stephanie Brooks was not a woman who accepted defeat gracefully. She had latched onto Daniel not just for his charm or good looks, but for his status and the connections he offered. Losing him now that the affair was out in the open was an outcome she couldn't stomach. One afternoon, Leah received an unmarked envelope. Inside were photographs of Daniel and Stephanie in various states of intimacy, entering hotels, locked in embraces, even one of them smiling in bed. Leah nearly choked on her tears. On the back of a particularly damning photograph was a handwritten note. "He's mine. Don't forget that." Leah's hand trembled as she read the note. The boldness of Stephanie's threat enraged her. She might have been willing to try couples therapy to hear Daniel out, but how could she fight a woman who went to such lengths to stake her claim? Shaking, she dialed Daniel's number. He answered on the third ring, sounding both hopeful and distressed. "I just received photographs," Leah said flatly. Daniel's exhale was audible. "Photographs of me and Stephanie?" "Yes." "And a note." She wrote, "He's mine, don't forget that." Daniel cursed under his breath. "Leah, I swear to you, I ended it. This must be her way of trying to threaten or blackmail me. She's done something like this before to an old boyfriend, but I never thought she'd pull it on me." Leah clenched her jaw, resisting the wave of pity. "I don't know who or what to believe anymore, Daniel. You lied to me once. How do I know you're not lying again?" "I can prove it," Daniel said, his voice urgent. "Please, meet me. Anywhere you feel safe. We'll talk. I'll show you everything her message is, the legal action I'm planning to take. I just need you to give me one chance to explain." Leah hesitated. Her instincts told her to remain guarded, but something in Daniel's voice suggested genuine remorse and desperation. Ultimately, for the sake of closure if nothing else, she agreed to meet him at a public cafe in the heart of Manhattan the following day. Leah arrived at the cafe early, choosing a quiet corner table. She wore sunglasses and a loose-fitting dress, her belly now visibly pregnant. She didn't want to draw any attention, particularly from paparazzi or random onlookers who recognized her as Mrs. Hamilton. A few minutes later, Daniel walked in. He looked tired, the usual confident glint in his eyes replaced by a haunted sadness. He approached her cautiously, as if he feared she might bolt at any moment. They sat in tense silence, neither sure how to start. Finally, Daniel slid a folder across the table. "These are screenshots of my messages with Stephanie," he said. "From the day I told her we had to end things, to the day she threatened to expose me. I was a fool, Leah, but I'm telling you the truth now." Leah opened the folder. Carefully, she read the messages. Indeed, there were dozens of texts from Stephanie, all with an increasingly desperate tone. In the earliest ones, she was playful, telling Daniel she missed him. Then, after Daniel's repeated refusals, her tone changed to anger, then threats. The last messages were chilling. If Daniel didn't leave Leah for her, she'd go to the tabloids, the board of Hamilton Innovations, or even Leah herself. The photographs Leah received were presumably part of that blackmail. "She's out for blood," Daniel murmured. "I made a mistake, a terrible, destructive mistake, but I'm trying to fix it." Leah's eyes stung as she flipped through the pages. The man across from her was the father of her child, and a cheater, but also a man who appeared genuinely remorseful, now potentially blackmailed by a scorned mistress. "What do you want from me?" Leah asked quietly. Daniel reached for her hand, but she flinched away. He let his hand hover in the space between them, eventually pulling it back. "I want to make amends. I love you. I love our child. I don't want to lose my family over a mistake, no matter how massive that mistake was. I'm prepared to fight Stephanie legally. Step down from my own company if that's what it takes. I just need you to believe I can be better." Leah watched him for a long moment, seeing not the billionaire the world revered, but a flawed, anxious man wrestling with the consequences of his actions. "I'll consider giving you another chance," she said finally, her voice trembling, "but only if you commit to marriage counseling. If you even look at Stephanie again." Her words caught in her throat. "I won't hesitate to file for divorce." A spark of hope lit Daniel's face. "I'll do whatever you ask," he whispered. "Thank you." Yet, as Leah left the cafe, her heart felt no lighter. She was giving him a chance, but trust was as elusive as a distant star, and she feared the complications with Stephanie were only just beginning. True to his word, Daniel initiated legal proceedings against Stephanie, claiming workplace harassment and attempted blackmail. Stephanie retaliated with her own lawsuit, alleging Daniel had made false promises of leaving his wife to be with her. The drama unfolded primarily in hushed boardroom discussions and discreet legal briefs, but word inevitably leaked. Soon, the tabloids buzzed with rumors of a toxic affair within Hamilton Innovations. Leah tried to shield herself from the media storm, focusing on her pregnancy and her healing process. Her mother, Teresa, stayed with her, guiding her through moments of intense hormonal ups and downs. At times, Leah would see a glimmer of her younger self in the mirror, terrified of abandonment, desperate for stability. Daniel, on the other hand, poured his energy into damage control. He cooperated with the internal investigation at Hamilton Innovations, stepping back from day-to-day operations to avoid conflicts of interest. He also made public statements reaffirming his commitment to ethical leadership, though he kept the real details private for Leah's sake. Eventually, Leah agreed to let Daniel move back in, primarily because she wanted him present during the final weeks of her pregnancy. She made it clear, however, that he'd be sleeping in the guest room until their marriage counselor deemed their progress sufficient. He accepted her terms without complaint, understanding the fragility of the situation. One evening, nearing the end of Leah's third trimester, she decided she was ready for a public outing with Daniel. Their marriage counselor had suggested re-establishing normal routines could help with emotional healing. Daniel proposed a quiet dinner at a small French bistro, far from the usual paparazzi hotspots. Leah agreed, albeit nervously. She donned a flowy dress that accommodated her growing belly, pinned her hair up in an elegant bun, and tried to muster some confidence. Daniel, clearly relieved to have any semblance of normalcy, escorted her in a black SUV to the bistro. He was attentive, opening her door, ensuring she walked carefully on the uneven sidewalk, and pulling out her chair. But the moment they stepped inside, Leah's heart slammed in her chest. Across the room sat Stephanie Brooks, coolly sipping a glass of red wine. Her gaze locked on them the instant they entered. Neither Daniel nor Leah had been aware that Stephanie, despite the ongoing legal mess, was brazen enough to show up at the same restaurant. Whether it was a calculated move or sheer coincidence, the tension was palpable. Leah's first instinct was to turn around and flee. But Daniel, seeing the panic in her eyes, placed a calming hand on her back and leaned in. "We're already here," he whispered. "We're not letting her control our lives." Reluctantly, Leah nodded. They took a table on the opposite side of the room, but Leah couldn't relax. Every so often, she glanced up to find Stephanie smirking at them. A chill ran down Leah's spine each time. Halfway through the meal, Stephanie rose from her seat and sauntered over, brazen and unapologetic. Daniel tensed, and Leah's stomach coiled in anxiety. Stephanie stopped by their table, swirling her wine in its glass. "Well, isn't this sweet?" she said in a saccharine tone, her gaze lingering on Leah's pregnant belly. "Playing happy family, are we?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "Stephanie, leave us alone." Stephanie shrugged. "I'm just saying hello to old friends." "But watch your back, Daniel. It's amazing how secrets can resurface when you least expect them." She offered a final, lingering glance at Leah and then strutted out of the restaurant, her heels clacking ominously against the floor. The entire exchange lasted less than a minute, but it left Leah shaking. Daniel quickly asked for the check, and they left soon after, driving home in a tense silence. That night, Leah couldn't sleep. She lay awake, her hands over her belly, staring at the ceiling. Stephanie's threat echoed in her mind like a sinister prophecy. Secrets can resurface when you least expect them. What more could Stephanie possibly have? Weeks rolled by, and life settled into an uneasy routine. Leah and Daniel continued therapy, delving into the reasons behind his infidelity. Daniel admitted he'd felt an irrational pressure to maintain a certain image, a self-made billionaire who could handle anything. Stephanie's admiration had temporarily fed his ego in ways he hadn't expected. But now he realized he was dangerously close to losing the only woman he truly loved. Leah found some solace in their sessions. She appreciated Daniel's honesty, but she still wrestled with trust issues. Every time his phone buzzed unexpectedly, her heart lurched. She hated that she no longer felt safe with the man she married. Then, one Saturday morning, a news alert popped up on Leah's phone. A well-known tabloid site had published a story titled "Billionaire Daniel Hamilton's Secret Wife or Secret Mistress." The article included salacious snippets of text messages, photos, and unconfirmed statements from close sources. It painted a scandalous picture, insinuating that Daniel might have made dubious financial promises to Stephanie, fueling speculation of hush money and hidden bank accounts. Leah felt sick. The gossip was partially true, partially twisted, but the public humiliation stung. The article also dragged her name through the mud, suggesting she'd known about the affair all along and tolerated it for financial gain. When Daniel got wind of the story, he was livid. He spent hours on calls with his legal team, but the tabloid refused to retract it. The story was generating too much traffic. Stephanie's lawsuit and Daniel's countersuit were both ongoing, creating a media goldmine that unscrupulous journalists were eager to exploit. Leah retreated into the penthouse, refusing to go out and face potential paparazzi. She felt trapped in a nightmare that only escalated each passing day. The final nail in the coffin of Leah's composure arrived on a stormy evening. She had just wrapped up an online yoga class for prenatal care when her water broke 3 weeks early. Panic surged through her veins as she realized she was alone in the penthouse. Daniel was at a late meeting with the board of directors trying to quell the recent PR disaster. She dialed Daniel's number, but it went to voicemail. Heart pounding, she tried again. Still nothing. Finally, she called Carmen Reyes, who rushed over with a calm efficiency. Carmen helped Leah into a car and navigated the rain-slicked streets to get her to the hospital. Meanwhile, Daniel checked his phone after his board meeting concluded, only to find frantic messages from Leah. He sped to the hospital, ignoring every traffic rule on the way. By the time he arrived, Leah was already in labor, lying in a hospital bed, tears streaming down her face. "Leah!" Daniel gasped, rushing to her side. She was drenched in sweat, her hair plastered to her forehead. Between contractions, Leah glared at him. "I needed you," she hissed, tears mixing with anger and fear. Daniel swallowed his guilt, clutching her hand. "I'm here now, Leah. I'm sorry, so sorry. Please hang on, we'll get through this." Leah wanted to push him away, but she had no strength left. The contractions ripped through her body, forcing her focus on delivering the baby. A flurry of doctors and nurses surrounded her, and Daniel did his best to remain supportive, whispering encouragements, though tears welled in his own eyes. Hours later, with one final push and a guttural cry, Leah brought their daughter into the world. The piercing wail that followed was the sweetest sound Leah had ever heard. Tears of relief and love cascaded down her cheeks as a nurse placed the newborn against her chest. For the next few days, Leah and Daniel were enveloped in the wonder and exhaustion of caring for a newborn. In the bright fluorescent lights of the hospital, the scandalous outside world felt distant. Even Stephanie's looming presence seemed muted by the fragile miracle cradled in Leah's arms. Leah named their daughter Hope, a reflection of the optimism she desperately wanted to hold on to. Daniel, true to his word, was an attentive father. He held Hope gently, feeding her, soothing her, marveling at every tiny movement. Watching him, Leah felt flickers of the love she once believed was unbreakable. He looked so genuine, so consumed by fatherly devotion, that for brief moments she forgot about the betrayal. When the doctors finally discharged Leah, paparazzi swarmed the hospital entrance. Despite the early hour, news vans clustered outside, hungry for a glimpse of the scandalous Hamilton baby. Daniel's security team quickly intervened, shielding Leah and Hope from flashing cameras. Daniel guided them into a private car with tinted windows, pressing a protective hand against Leah's shoulder. As they drove away, Leah clutched Hope tightly, the chaos pounding outside her window. She vowed to protect her daughter from these intrusions, from the toxicity swirling around their family. Back home, they settled into a new routine. Late-night feedings, diaper changes, and the occasional call from the attorneys. Stephanie's lawsuit had stalled after the tabloid story blew up, and it seemed she was negotiating behind the scenes for a settlement. Daniel, determined not to lose more than he already had, refused to cave easily. But one evening, as Leah was nursing Hope in the nursery, Daniel walked in looking grim. He pressed his phone to his chest, face taut. "It's Stephanie," he said quietly. "She wants to meet me at her attorney's office tomorrow. She claims she's prepared to settle everything under certain conditions." Leah's eyes flashed with alarm. "And what conditions might those be?" "She wouldn't say over the phone," Daniel replied. But her tone suggested she has something new to leverage. The next day, Daniel headed to the attorney's office alone, at Leah's insistence. She refused to set eyes on Stephanie ever again. Hours passed with no update. Leah paced the penthouse, Hope nestled in her arms. Dark possibilities cluttered her mind. Was Stephanie going to demand hush money? Or would she reveal more damning evidence to the media? When Daniel finally returned, Leah could see a mixture of relief and anger etched on his face. He let out a long exhale. "Stephanie brought a fabricated paternity claim," he said bluntly. "She implied that the baby she's carrying might be mine." Leah's blood ran cold. "She's pregnant?" Daniel nodded. "She claims it was conceived during our affair, but she couldn't provide concrete proof. We have text messages from months ago where she said she was on birth control. Plus, I've insisted on a paternity test." Her attorney suggested a substantial settlement to keep this quiet. Leah reeled, leaning against the couch for support. "So that's her new leverage? A child, if it's even true?" "Exactly," Daniel replied. "She's gambling on the possibility that I'll pay her to avoid more scandal. But I told her, under no circumstances would I agree to a settlement without a paternity test. We're scheduling it next week." Leah struggled to breathe. The idea that Stephanie might be carrying Daniel's child, her child's half-sibling, filled her with dread. The betrayal felt fresh again, like a wound torn open. Yet, beneath the anger, a surprising feeling surfaced: pity. If Stephanie's claim was false, she was truly desperate. And if it was true, everything would become infinitely more complicated. The days crawled by, each one overshadowed by anxiety. Leah tried to care for Hope as best she could, but her thoughts were consumed by the looming paternity test. She attended therapy sessions, confiding in Dr. Kimberly Baxter about her fears. Daniel, for his part, was more attentive than ever, taking night shifts with Hope, quietly reassuring Leah that he loved her and would stand by her side no matter the results. When the results finally arrived, Daniel opened the envelope with trembling hands. Leah stood beside him in the living room, arms wrapped around herself protectively. He skimmed the document, exhaling in a sudden rush. "I'm not the father," he whispered. "Less than a 1% chance. Not mine." Relief and disbelief washed over Leah in equal measure. She sank onto the couch, tears stinging her eyes. "Oh, thank God!" Daniel crouched beside her, placing a hand on her knee. Stephanie was bluffing. She tried to trap me. Despite the relief, anger flared in Leah. She couldn't fathom the depths of cruelty it took to stage such a lie. But at least now, with the lawsuit concluding, they could move forward. Stephanie, exposed for her deception, would have little footing to continue her blackmail. A week later, Daniel's attorneys confirmed that Stephanie had dropped her lawsuit. She faced potential legal consequences for her false paternity claim and any further attempts to blackmail. Daniel risked criminal charges. She disappeared from the tabloids as quickly as she had arrived, leaving behind only a swirl of rumors and a battered reputation. Leah and Daniel emerged from the chaos with cautious hope. Their marriage counselor commended their efforts, pointing out that the affair and subsequent scandal, while devastating, also forced them to confront deep-seated issues in their relationship: Daniel's hunger for admiration and Leah's fear of abandonment. They decided to renew their vows in a small, private ceremony, nothing like the grand Lake Como affair. This time, it took place in Leah's childhood backyard in Massachusetts, with just a handful of family and close friends in attendance. The ceremony was intimate, heartfelt, and underscored by the lessons they had learned. Daniel vowed to cherish and protect Leah, acknowledging the fragility of trust. Leah, in turn, promised to remain open to forgiveness, even as she refused to ignore past wounds. When they returned to New York, the city felt different to them, more complicated and yet brimming with possibilities. Leah settled into a new normal of motherhood: diaper changes, lullabies, and quiet nights with hope nestled in her arms. Daniel resumed his role at Hamilton Innovations, but established strict boundaries: no late-night meetings with female staff, transparent calendars, and frequent check-ins with Leah. Months later, Leah found herself in the nursery again, the soft glow of a nightlight illuminating the pastel walls. The hush of evening draped over the penthouse, every corner quieter than before, quieter, perhaps, than it had ever been during the tumult of the past year. She rocked slowly in the chair, gazing down at baby Hope, who lay dozing in her arms. The infant's tiny fingers curled around Leah's thumb, and Leah marveled at how such a delicate grip could hold her entire life together. On the adjacent wall hung a gallery of memories, a series of snapshots, capturing laughter, tears, and firsts. One photo was of Daniel gently cradling Hope the day she was born, the raw emotion on his face telling a story that needed no words. Another was from their modest backyard vow renewal in Massachusetts: Leah in a simple lace dress, Daniel in a tailored navy suit, both gazing down at their sleeping daughter with the same awestruck wonder. Each image felt like a testament to survival. A knock on the nursery door broke the hush. Daniel poked his head in, hesitant yet hopeful. "Mind if I come in?" he asked quietly. Leah nodded, offering a small smile. In the weeks since their vow renewal, a gentle equilibrium had settled between them. She no longer recoiled at the sound of his voice, nor did she scrutinize every text message on his phone. Yet echoes of their painful past still lingered, and both of them knew that rebuilding trust was an ongoing process, one that required patience, empathy, and constant effort. Daniel stepped inside. He moved with uncharacteristic softness, a far cry from the commanding presence he displayed in the boardroom. Kneeling beside the rocking chair, he gazed at Hope with a mixture of pride and awe. "She's grown so much," he whispered. "It feels like she changes every day." Leah brushed a light kiss on Hope's forehead, then looked at Daniel. "Every day she reminds me that our lives can change just as quickly. One moment we think we have everything figured out. The next, the ground crumbles beneath our feet." A flicker of regret shadowed Daniel's features. He reached out, gently placing a hand atop Leah's. "And sometimes we deserve that fall." we lose sight of what truly matters. His voice trembled, carrying the weight of his remorse. But I promise you, I'll spend every day proving I've learned from my mistakes. Leah studied him for a moment. She remembered the dark nights filled with suspicion, the betrayal that had stolen her faith in him and nearly taken away her ability to trust anyone. Yet here he was, stripped of pride and bravado, focused only on her and hope. "I believe you're trying," she said softly, "and I appreciate that. It's just, trust doesn't heal overnight. I still have days when I wake up in a panic, thinking about what happened." Daniel's expression was pained. "I know, and you have every right to feel that way. I'll never pretend otherwise. But I love you, Leah, and I love our daughter. If it takes a lifetime to prove that I'm committed to this family, then a lifetime is what I'll give." For a moment, neither spoke. Hope stirred in her sleep, her tiny mouth forming a contented smile that seemed far too wise for such a young face. Leah felt tears prick at her eyes. It occurred to her how fragile and fleeting life could be, that everything they valued could be lost if they didn't nurture it with the utmost care. "I want us to move forward," Leah finally said, her voice trembling with a mix of determination and vulnerability. "I don't want to be stuck in a cycle of resentment, but I need your patience and honesty every step of the way." Daniel nodded, eyes shining with sincerity. "You have it, I promise." The soft whir of a lullaby machine in the corner provided a gentle background sound, lulling Hope deeper into slumber. Leah shifted her daughter slightly, easing herself out of the rocking chair. Together, she and Daniel laid Hope in her crib, each of them placing a hand on the edge as though sealing a silent vow over their sleeping child. Leah glanced at the floor to ceiling windows. The city's twinkling lights reminded her of those early days, with Daniel full of excitement, promise, and the naive belief that their fairy tale would never falter. She inhaled deeply, choosing to believe that, though their innocence might be gone, something more resilient had grown in its place. They left the nursery hand in hand, turning off the lights and shutting the door behind them. In the hallway, a line of freshly hung photographs captured the transformation of their relationship, from glamour and globe-trotting adventures to moments of raw, everyday warmth like Daniel burping Hope at 2 in the morning or Leah reading nursery rhymes with mismatched pajamas. It was a new chapter in their life, one built on grappling with mistakes rather than trying to mask them. Leah paused outside the door that led to Daniel's home office. She hesitated, recalling the countless hours he once spent there, oblivious to how his physical and emotional distance was poisoning their marriage. Sensing her tension, Daniel turned to her, concern etched on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. "Just." Remembering how lonely it felt, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "When you were gone those nights, or when you shut me out, I was here with my fears, feeling the baby kick, wondering if you'd come home and let me in." Daniel sighed heavily, guilt shadowing his features again. "I can't change the past, Leah, but I can change every day going forward. I make sure I'm home for dinner now, that I help with Hope's nighttime routine, that I share my schedule with you. I hope it shows how much I want to be here." She reached out, lacing her fingers through his. "It does," she managed to say, her eyes brimming with tears that spoke of both pain and relief. "And I do see you trying, Daniel. That's why I'm still here." He pressed her hand to his lips, a tender gesture that took her back to their early days before the affairs, the betrayals, and the media frenzy. It was a reminder that, at their core, there had once been a love pure enough to draw them together in the first place. Maybe it was that seed of sincerity that could help them push through the trauma and forge a deeper connection. After a moment, they made their way to the living room. The cozy space had been transformed since Hope's birth, plush baby blankets, bottles on the coffee table, and squeaky toys scattered around. Yet, far from an inconvenience, these items gave the room a sense of life and promise. Leah sat down on the couch and Daniel settled next to her. The penthouse felt unexpectedly warm, as though the love they'd almost lost was finding its way back, gently and steadily. "How about we watch something light tonight?" Daniel suggested, taking the TV remote but hesitating before turning it on. "Or maybe we could just talk." Leah smiled, relieved that he genuinely wanted conversation rather than using the TV as a buffer to avoid meaningful interaction. Talking sounds good. They spent the next hour discussing the little things, funny moments with Hope, plans for the upcoming holidays, and the possibility of taking a short family trip once their daughter was a bit older. Each topic felt like a small stitch in the tapestry of their renewed bond, an act of weaving their lives together again, thread by careful thread. When, at last, Leah grew too tired to continue, Daniel helped her to her feet, and they checked on Hope one more time before heading to their bedroom. There, in the quiet sanctuary of night, Leah couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. Not long ago, she was convinced their marriage was irreversibly shattered. She had felt every inch of heartbreak, every stab of betrayal, and every ounce of exhaustion from fighting a battle that seemed unwinnable. Now, she felt a tentative peace, the knowledge that while nothing was guaranteed, they were both still choosing each other. The road to healing was far from over. It might never truly end. But every step forward was a victory she no longer took for granted. Before turning out the lights, Daniel placed a gentle kiss on Leah's cheek. "I'm so grateful you didn't give up on me," he whispered, emotion making his voice thick. Leah pressed her lips together, tears shimmering in her eyes once more. "I'm grateful you gave me reasons not to," she replied quietly. "Let's keep giving each other those reasons, okay?" He nodded, and she flicked off the lamp. Darkness wrapped around them, but instead of fear or suspicion, Leah felt only the soft hum of potential. She curled into Daniel's embrace, aware of his warm breath against her hair. Outside, the city pulsed with its usual frenetic energy, but here, in this unguarded moment, it was as though they existed in a different realm, one shaped by the choices they made together. As she drifted towards sleep, Leah thought of her daughter's name and the promise it held for them both. Hope, a symbol of all the mistakes they had survived and all the futures they had yet to discover, hand in hand. In the end, love's resilience won out against the shadows of deceit. Leah and Daniel Hamilton stood at the precipice of devastation but chose to fight for their marriage and the life of their new baby girl. Their journey reminds us that trust, once broken, can still be mended through honesty, therapy, and the willingness to confront our darkest failings. Leah's unwavering courage, Daniel's remorse, and the innocent promise represented by their child illuminate a universal truth. Even in the midst of betrayal, the heart can find its way back to hope. If this story moved you, if you felt Leah's heartbreak, Daniel's desperation, and the power of love's ultimate triumph, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us bring more tales of resilience, drama, and redemption to life. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing even more stories with you soon.